Hi everyone, today we will discuss about classification of hormones. Firstly, hormones. Hormones are defined as organic substances produced in small amounts by specific tissues in endocrine glands, and they are secreted into the bloodstream to control the metabolic and biological activities in the target cells. So the classification of hormones, there are two types based on the chemical nature and based on the mechanism of action. Based on the chemical nature, there are of three types, that is protein and polypeptide hormones, steroid hormones, amino acid derivatives. Whereas protein and polypeptide hormones, examples of this protein and polypeptide hormones are insulin, glucagon, ADH and oxytocin. Insulin it is secreted from the pancreas, where the main function of this insulin is it lowers blood glucose level, which causes the lowering of the blood glucose level, which causes hypoglycemic effect and promotes protein synthesis and lipogenesis. Whereas glucagon, it is also secreted by the pancreas, and this glucagon, main function of this glucagon is increases the blood glucose level, whereas insulin decreases the blood glucose level, whereas glucagon increases the blood glucose level and stimulates glycogenolysis and lipolysis. Whereas antidiuretic hormone, which is called as ADH, which is stored in the posterior pituitary, which promotes water reabsorption by the kidneys. And oxytocin it is also stored in the posterior pituitary, and the main function of oxytocin is stimulation of uterus. It stimulates uterine contraction. Oxytocin stimulates uterine contractions during pregnancy and also helps in milk ejection. And the second type is steroid hormones, which includes glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids and sex hormones. Sex hormones means we will be discussing about estrogens and androgens. First, the glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids, they are secreted from the adrenal cortex, and the main function of glucocorticoids are affect metabolism and suppress immune system. Whereas mineralocorticoids, the origin means it is secreted from the adrenal cortex as glucocorticoids, and the main function of mineralocorticoids is it maintains salt and water balance. And sex hormones, which is estrogen and androgens. Estrogens, it is also origin, estrogen origin is from ovaries and adrenal cortex. Androgen is from testes and adrenal cortex, whereas estrogen main function is female sexual characteristics. It affects the female sexual characteristics and also menstrual cycle, whereas androgens, the main function of androgens, it affects the male sexual characteristics and spermatogenesis. And the third is amino acid derivatives, where amino acid derivatives, which includes epinephrine, non-epinephrine, thyroxine and triiodothyroxines, T3 and T4. But epinephrines, it is like secreted from the adrenal medulla. The main function of epinephrines are increase heart rate and blood pressure and promotes glycogenolysis in liver and muscle and lipolysis in adipose tissues. Whereas norepinephrines, it is also secreted from the adrenal medulla, and the main function of norepinephrines is stimulates lipolysis in adipose tissues. Whereas T4 and T3 hormones, they are secreted from the thyroid, and the major function of this T3 and T4 hormones, it promote general metabolic rates. So this is the classification of hormones based on the chemical nature, and the second will move on is based on the mechanism of action. So the second type of classification is based on the mechanism of action. So based on the mechanism of action, there are of two groups, that is group 1 hormones and group 2 hormones. Now we will discuss how this group 1 hormone mechanism action takes place. This group 1 hormone mechanism action, it is also called as mobile receptor mechanism. We will discuss why this is called as mobile receptor mechanism. Firstly, the hormones which is included in this hormone mechanism action of group 1 are glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, sex steroids and calcitriol, T3, T4 and retinoic acids. Why these two groups are there, hormones are there in this mechanism? We will discuss that glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, sex steroids, calcitriol, all these are steroids and they are derivatives of cholesterol, whereas T3, T4 retinoic acids, actually these glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, dextrose and calcitriol, for this kind of hormones, the receptor means the receptors which forms hormone receptor complex, those type of receptors are present in the cytoplasm itself for this kind of hormones, as they are derivatives of cholesterol and they are steroids. But for T3 and T4 and retinoic acids, the receptors for binding and forming hormone receptor complexes for these type of hormones, they are present in the nucleus. They have to move into the cytoplasm and cytoplasm, and then they have to go to the nucleus, then they have to form hormone receptor complex for T3 and T4 and retinoic acid. For these glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids and dextrose, this kind of hormones, the receptors which are present in the cytoplasm itself, so no need of moving into the nucleus. So why this is called as mobile receptor mechanism? Because after all the process is done, like after translation and transcription, everything is done, they modulate gene expression in target cells. That's why they are called as mobile receptor mechanism. We'll see how this works. So as the hormones, actually the hormones which I mentioned here, all these hormones are lipophilic in nature. Lipophilic in nature means they are soluble in lipids. So this lipid soluble hormones can easily pass plasma membrane through intracellular receptors. So these hormones, all type of hormones which I mentioned, they can pass easily through the plasma membrane with the help of intracellular receptors. So these receptors located in the cytosol and the nucleus. As I mentioned, these hormones they form hormone receptor complex in cytosol and the nucleus. So the receptors either is present in the cytosol and the nucleus. So firstly, what happens here, we'll see here. Actually, in the blood capillaries, there will be transport proteins which is binded for free hormones. As the free hormones get separated, it will pass into the cell membrane and flow into the cytoplasm. These lipid soluble hormones diffuses into the cell, passing into the intracellular spaces and reaches the cytoplasm. In this cytoplasm, if the hormone, it depends, like hormones like glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids, they'll form a hormone receptor complex in cytoplasm itself. So for them, the receptors, those hormones, the receptors present in the cytoplasm itself. So activated receptor hormone complex, they form activated hormone receptor complex. These hormones will form hormone receptor complex in the cytoplasm and they will move inside the nucleus. So for those hormones like T3 and T4, for those kind of hormones here, they have receptors present in nucleus only, not in cytoplasm. For those kind of hormones, the receptors are present in the nucleus and they will form hormone receptor complex inside the nucleus rather than the cytoplasm, like glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids. So what this hormone receptor complex do? This hormone receptor complex inside the nucleus, they have hormone responsive elements like HRE, like hormone responsive elements. These hormone responsive elements, these are like specific regions in the DNA. Like see here, the black spot which is on the DNA, these are the hormone responsive elements, which is region on the DNA, causes increased expressions of specific genes. This causes expressions of a specific gene where through transcription they form mRNA, and after reaching the cytoplasm they will bind to the ribosomes and undergo translation and form a new protein. What this new protein do? This new protein is formed. This new protein is the main thing which alters the biochemical activity of the target cell. So here you go. This protein which is formed newly will alter the biochemical process of the target cell. So here this is called as group 1 hormone mechanism action. This is how hormones, they will form hormone receptor complex and they will do transcription and translation and they will form a new protein which alters the biochemical activities of the target cell. Thank you.